Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Magenta Mix podcast, where we focus on purpose, strategy, and culture, and talk with leaders who harmonize these key elements to create lasting change in their organizations. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the world of culture transformation with our special guest, Bhavi Shah. Bhavi serves as Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel, and Assistant Secretary at Vitalant. She's busy. You might have heard of Vitalant. They're one of the largest non-for-profit blood and biotherapy healthcare organizations, providing hospitals and patients across the U.S. a safe blood supply, specialized laboratory services, transfusion medicine expertise, and world-renowned research. In this episode, we're going to unravel the culture transformation underway right now at Vitalant. The organization was formed through the merger of 10 nonprofit blood centers over a decade. Bhavi, in her unique role as Chief Legal Officer, played a key part in Vitalant's footprint. So we're going to dig into why culture became such a big deal, how we got the leadership team on board for this journey, and the pivotal moments when they launched this exciting new culture. Creating and deploying a culture is oftentimes easier than sustaining it. You know that. We'll get the download from Bhavi on how Vitalant plans to keep their new and very intentional culture going strong. So if you're curious about the amazing journey of culture change with a dynamic organization like Vitalant, stick around for this enlightening episode of the Magenta Mix podcast. Everybody, help me welcome Bhavi Shah. Bhavi, it's great to see you. I can see you're in your office in Scottsdale. How are you today?
Doing well. Getting ready for the holidays.
Good. I bet you are. For everybody who doesn't know Bhavi Shah, she has been spending, I don't know how many months redoing your pool area, Bhavi. How long has this been?
Unfortunately, it's been almost a year and a half with this whole yard project.
And will you have it done in time for Christmas?
Yes, we're having it done in time to host a couple parties this weekend.
And Bhavi invited me to one tomorrow night, and I couldn't manage to get to Scottsdale, but I'm sorry, take pictures.
Definitely.
In the meantime, it's good to hang out with you today. Bhavi, I generally don't read questions. I have some notes that I jot down before any interview with a guest, but because, as I mentioned in your intro, you're also the Chief Legal Officer at Vitalant, and you pass these questions through legal, I feel obligated to read them so I get them right.
That works for me. Thanks.
All right. So you're the Chief Legal Officer, as I mentioned, at Vitalant. So I'm curious, and I'm sure others are, what inspired you to champion culture transformation at Vitalant?
Well, certainly as part of an executive leadership team, you hear a lot about what is taking place across your system, and you understand that there are some cultural challenges. I actually did a workshop with you last, I think it was September, out in DC, and it was amongst a group of legal counsel, and we all did the workshop to understand what are the greatest things about our culture, what are the worst things about our culture. And during that exercise, I realized quickly that one of the things that we had missed on, and in terms of an opportunity as part of all of our M&A activity, is to put culture first as part of integration rather than the systems, processes, onboarding. And so I quickly acknowledged that, said, I need to introduce you, Gary, to our CEO and COO to talk a little bit about what you can do to help us now at this point in our integration journey. And they quickly seized that moment to bring you on board.
Yeah, thank you. And what I'll say is I remember the story is the convener of that conference is someone that I've worked with for years. And they said, hey, we've got maybe 16, 17 people. Will you come to DC and address them? And I thought, really, do I want to get on a plane with 16, 17 people? I'm a numbers guy in that you talk to 16 people, that usually yields you zero new business. And so I was hesitant. And then she said, and they're all attorneys. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I didn't have a 15-year relationship with this woman and her business partner / husband, I would have said no. But I thought, these people have been very good to me. I'm getting on the plane. And Bhavi comes up to me after this workshop and she says, I need to talk to you. And I rolled my eyes mentally and said, oh, sure, you're the CLO. I have never sold into a CLO, Chief Legal Officer, ever in all of my 30 years. And now all of a sudden I'm going to sell into a CLO. And sure enough, Bhavi had me on the phone with their CEO, COO, and others a few days later. And not only was I shocked, I'm pleased because I have loved every minute of working with the organization. So we're really interested in digging into this idea of how you brought 10 plus cultures together and your aha moment around culture. So are there any specific incidents or observations that highlighted the need for a culture shift following the merger of those 10 centers to become a national organization?
Absolutely. One of the challenges we had is even with change management, as we were trying to standardize our practices and bring people on board, there was a lot of resistance along the way because each organization felt that they did something better than what the new merged organization was doing. And we would see pockets as well. So, in my role, I also oversee our compliance integrity forward program. And we could see some geographical pockets where, we may get increased activity of employee relations matters or increased activity on the hotline. And it was really indicative that we really didn't have a unified culture, and we needed to work harder on that to make sure we were all talking the same language and looking to improve the organization.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this to you and the leadership team before. When you think of a blended family, it's bringing the rules and norms of two families together, sort of new mom and new dad get together and, for example, and we've got this blended family and we've got to create new norms. And you did that times 5. I mean, you had 10 different organizations. And what we find is that organizations, even Vitalant, prioritize sort of the legal and the financial aspects during M&A. So how are you advocating for a strong culture focus and incorporating it into that M&A process now? What's that advocation look like and how's it going?
Yeah, I think it's really forward going now. So we've just spent the last year really defining what the new culture looks like. We're all working on it together. So as we look at new M&A targets, I think that really a focus on due diligence, for example, how difficult is it going to be to integrate this organization into the new culture? Is it going to set us back? And then once we do an acquisition or merger transaction, it's really putting it as part of the playbook right from the outset and focusing on culture from day one rather than focusing on it after we've integrated systems and processes. I think it'll help with change management as well.
It's interesting that you said that focusing on culture day one. So oftentimes when I work with organizations and we think about the hiring process and onboarding process, what I say is, we need to evaluate whether someone's a culture fit long before we say yes to one another, helping them understand what our culture is, helping us understand what's important to them as individuals. And what you're talking about is the same thing at a much bigger level. We're not just talking about an individual's fit. We're talking about an organization's overall fit to come into our family. Is that right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's based on geography, and we understand that there's local geographic, cultural norms. But we can also speak the same language as the family, acknowledging, appreciating those individual norms.
Yeah. And let's be clear, there's almost never a time where another organization is going to be 100% fit, right? That we're doing the exact same things, we live the exact same way. But it's got to be close enough where we say we can make some adjustments on one side, the other, or both sides to bring them in.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
So cultivating a culture change, that's what we'll call it here, often requires support. I'm going to take out often requires, always requires support from top leadership. I mean, I think about it as leaders, one of their primary jobs is to set the tone, the culture for the business. So how did Vitalant engage leaders to tackle the topic of culture? There's so much going on at Vitalant. How did you tackle the topic of culture as a leadership team, align, and help to start to promote a new one?
I think it's making it a strategic imperative for the organization, and it starts from the top. And certainly we started with our executive leadership team first, because I think our staff really want to see that the leaders are walking the walk first. We're still on our journey, starting at the top. Before we brought in the next level leaders, we needed to work on ourselves and make sure that we were all aligned and engaged on the culture initiative. We then brought in the next level leaders and had to create an environment that allowed for that psychological safety of having those open and honest two-way conversations. And it was a little hard to swallow at times, right? And it was, hearing from the next level leaders about where there were opportunities or what their observations were. But I think that was critical to the process, because we had to hear, what may not have been working as well as we thought it was, to figure out how do we then drive this change and overcome any barriers that were out there.
Yeah, and Bhavi, if I may share an observation in working with your top executive leaders and your next level leaders, is that there were difficult conversations to be had. Where are we at? Where do we need to go? What kind of change does this mean for us? It wasn't a cakewalk for top leaders or next level leaders. And I think everybody individually and as teams got some really tough feedback from one another. But I wanted to share with our audience that what was incredibly fortifying, bonding, and even an accelerant to the adoption of a new culture, at least in theory, was the fact that you were also unified around a common mission. And I've mentioned this many times when I've been with you all in person. I don't think I've ever seen an organization more aligned and bonded around a mission. Can you just speak to that for a minute?
Absolutely. I think that we are clearly a mission-based organization that, really strives and relishes on our mission. And what we do is really to unite our donors, bring forward all of the talent together and innovation to save and improve lives. And that's what we remind ourselves each day. And so as we looked at culture, we said, how do we make sure that this new cultural statement that we develop and that how we're going to behave with our cultural aspiration, we need to make sure that it stays in alignment with that mission.
Yeah, really, really well done there on the mission. Very unifying, a great launch pad. So share, if you don't mind, the key elements that define the new culture at Vitalant, and explain, if you would, how they align with the organization's mission.
Yes, absolutely. So, the culture statement that we had prepared as an executive leadership team with all of the feedback from the leaders was really at Vitalant, you belong. Together, we lead with our hearts to find a better way. And what we found is that there's really this element of belonging, which aligns with our DEI efforts that we have undertaken over the last several years. There's also the concept of togetherness and teamwork, and that's always been critical as part of our value statement. And then leading with heart in our minds was really, using that empathy. At the end of the day, we're all here to save and improve patient lives. And so we're making decisions that may be difficult to accomplish our mission. And we're always trying to improve on it by finding that better way through innovative thinking. And that's certainly an area that we're continuing to work on. And certainly is something that post integration activities, we have plenty of opportunity there to figure out how do we do this a little differently to deliver on our mission.
Yeah, I think it's important for the audience to know, when they hear blood banking, they may think, oh, well, that's pretty steady, not a lot of change going on there. And the thing I love about consulting the most is that I get to learn about new things every day. And my aha, listeners, was that blood banking is changing. The blood business is dynamic, just like your business. They have lots of opportunity for change and growth along the way. So there is change going on there, and obviously requires a unified culture to help accelerate that change. Mm-hmm. Launching a new culture is much more difficult than defining one, as you just did. It takes getting a lot of people to intellectually understand it, emotionally engage in it, et cetera. So I think it would be helpful if you outlined the steps or strategies that you're using to ensure the successful rollout and the adoption of the new culture at Vitalant.
So we're meeting now as sort of the top leadership team on a quarterly basis, whether it's going to be in person or in a hybrid, format, because we are dispersed across the country. And so we have to re-engage and make sure that there is alignment, and that we're continuing to emphasize the culture. One of the things that we adopted really is, as part of our huddles, because we've been doing huddles for years, is having everyone do one at least weekly, and then talking about culture and asking people to share stories about how we emulated the culture, what went well, where there was opportunity for improvement, how do we do this a little differently. We also have other tools that our teams have come up with, like with the Microsoft Teams channel, where people share stories about how they've implemented culture and how there's been increased engagement that they've observed amongst their own teams as a result of some of the changes that they've made.
Yeah. A few things I love to just talk with you about. You're having these huddles, and I think originally when they were being reintroduced and introduced with more of a culture bent to them, my impression is that maybe we saw some indifference, like, yeah, this is not that groundbreaking or earth-shattering. And I believe that we've seen a shift there. The way I look at it is culture is built through relationships. We're really making a promise to each other when we're talking about culture. And those relationships only happen through conversations and dialogue. And the huddles create a really very specific point and excuse, if you will, to come together. And so as I have had access to some of your team's channels, et cetera, and you hear what people are saying, I just want to give kudos to your teams because they've become very innovative. They've thought like, well, it's not just going to be my team. I can invite another team and make this cross-functional. We can do this during lunch. We can do this as an offsite, as an onsite, standing up, sitting down, longer, shorter. And they've really taken it on and embraced it. And some of them have come back to me and said, don't necessarily love all the huddle questions, so I've replaced or supplanted with this, which is the intent, really, to make it their own. So I would just say that you guys have really high marks. Mm-hmm. Your teams have really high marks, your leaders at the line level, in taking on these conversations and making it very specific to their teams, but still focusing on culture there. So I've been really impressed with the way, for the most part, the organization has adopted it. So that's in the plus column. But I also know you've had some challenges when you're encountering implementing culture change. So how are you addressing some of the challenges, and maybe you'll share what some of them have been?
Yeah, I think it's really understanding the why. Why are we doing this? And I think, following the pandemic, the healthcare industry has been pretty strained overall. There's a lot of burnout as well. And we get used to doing the things that we've always done because it's always easy to continue doing it. But it's really explaining why. How could we do this better? How could we do this more efficiently to deliver on our mission? How could we, why do we need to do this so that we have long-term sustainability? And I think that when you have those conversations with the team, they understand the importance and they get behind this and really embrace it. And they come up with, a lot of great ideas, and we have to figure out how do we then implement those great ideas with all of the competing priorities that may be at foot that were already in the pipeline.
And if I could add yes to all of that, when you think about the challenges and the challenges of adoption, right? We're asking people to change. We're asking them to take on new concepts, to go out and take on new actions and behaviors. And next level leaders often want their leaders to go first. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I thought that the executive team, you and others, did really well was to be vulnerable in front of your next level leaders. So everyone, Dave Green is the CEO at Vitalant, and I think he really led Bhavi really well here, where he was able to stand up in front of next level leaders, and in the roadshow he did across the country on the new culture, and say, hey, we brought all of you together, and there are some things we do differently if we could hit the rewind button. So he was very vulnerable in saying, in the rearview mirror, things may look a little differently. Now, we got to the ultimate goal, and we are saving lives across the country by putting all 10 of us together. But from a culture standpoint, maybe we would have reordered that if we looked at it differently. We would have put a different priority on it. And I'll tell you, because I was with him on the roadshow, and you were there some of the time as well, I think you immediately start to penetrate people's exteriors. I was going to say Teflon, but that's a little strong, because I found your people to be really, for the most part, very open. But if people were a little skeptical or maybe even resistant, which is natural in every organization, I think Dave and the rest of the leadership team that toured the country with him demonstrated vulnerability in a way that allowed people to say, there's something different here. We're having a different conversation, and it opened them up to change. Any thoughts on that? That's the way I saw it. What did you see?
Absolutely. I think our CEO leads with humility, and certainly was very open to the feedback that was received. And oftentimes you just need to, similar to having a witness on the stand in my world, or going to a mediation, it's, having your day in court, your opportunity to share what has gone well, what has not gone well. And I know that, there is a sentiment out there that, is this the flavor of the week? And I think that's why it's really critical to continue to invest and continue to reiterate, because we will never get there in a cultural transformation unless we've got a commitment to continue investing in this initiative.
Yeah, so I'm going to brag on you for a minute, your organization, while I encourage our listeners at the same time. Vitalant has committed now to 6 consecutive quarterly next level leader meetings, where they're bringing their top 55 to 65 leaders from across the country to their corporate office in Scottsdale, which, by the way, is new and beautiful. Just a gorgeous place to be proud of, to bring your leaders. And they're bringing them in there for these 6 full days of engagement around a continued culture conversation, and building the executive leadership skills of these leaders to go and engage the thousands of people that report up through them. And so many organizations, Bhavi, make the mistake of, they create the culture, they define it, they define the actions and behaviors associated with it. They even put their reward and recognition programs and match them up with them. And then they put it away. Hey, yeah, we launched it, go do it. And what I love about the commitment that your leadership team has made is, you're keeping the conversation going. You're introducing new huddles every quarter. I think a new one's coming out in January. I know a new one's coming out in January. You're bringing your next level leaders together. Your leadership team has been in the field engaging their teams. And you're doing that with the intensity that's really required, because as we talked about, as we started this culture change, and for those of you on our podcast today who may not know this, your best case for changing your culture, your best case is usually around 18 months, more often 36 months, and in some instances 5 to 7 years in government or union organizations. And it only actually happens, that change only occurs when you have that consistent engagement that addresses Bobby's comment, which is, people are waiting to see if this is flavor of the month. I have witnessed, Bobby, in my career, organizations where big initiatives, strategic, cultural change process, where people say, I've been here 20 years. The leadership team has only been here on average 5. I'm going to wait for them to leave, and I'll keep doing things the way I do them. And you also have a very tenured organization. So I could see that as a potential issue. Okay, well, let's wait them out. let's see if this goes away. And you have made it very clear this is here to stay. And I think people are taking it seriously, and not like it's punitive. They're starting to embrace it. Matter of fact, they are embracing it. We can see it. We can hear it. We can feel it. So maybe you have a story or an illustration that will help people understand some of the positive momentum or impacts that you're seeing through your employees or the environment.
Absolutely. And I agree. It is a long-term investment to not only drive that change, but really to sustain it long-term. And so, it has to be embedded within, how you approach your onboarding, how you approach your policies and procedures, how do you approach corrective action, all of those things. And, we're at the beginning of our journey. What we have seen so far is, certainly some improvement in engagement of employees from different leaders. We still have a long ways to go, and we won't be doing another employee engagement survey for another year. And time will tell whether we can impact our employees' overall engagement for the organization. We also saw, we decided to do a Culture Champion Award as part of our employee events recognition that we're doing here in February. It's sort of a red carpet event to celebrate a lot of our staff members. And we saw a number of leaders be very thoughtful about people to nominate, whether they were in other business units, people that were reporting up to them, as to how they were really embracing and emulating the culture. And I think that's going to be the coveted award moving forward.
So I'm just going to share with everybody that I've been flattered to be asked to announce that the launching of the Cultural Award. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm going to announce the Cultural Award at that ceremony. So while we're here on the phone, do I have to wear a tuxedo? And I need to know in advance, so I need to know if I need to be in my skinny tuxedo or my heavier tuxedo. I need to know if I need to eat more or less right now.
There will be some with tuxedos at that event.
You said red carpet, so I figured. All right, well, it's February after the holidays, so I'm going to go for eating and going into the husky tuxedo and not the skinny one. Bhavi, you said the magic words there. We're at the beginning, you said, of this. And you're 6 months in, and you're saying you're at the beginning. And I just want to put an exclamation mark next to that, because so many organizations would be on to the next initiative. Not that you can't have multiple initiatives at the same time, but they would have shelved this one. Okay, we did the culture thing. Let's keep going. And I just love that you said we're at the beginning, because we'll talk we'll talk before then, but we'll look back in 36 months, hopefully less, in the rearview mirror and say, what does engagement look like? What has been able to change? Have we accelerated our strategy? Have we accelerated innovation in the business? I'm eager to see that, but I'm really happy for the recognition that you're still in the first section of this change. So I have one more question, and this is the big one. Healthcare is really rapidly evolving. You see what's going on in the industry that you're in and that you serve. How do you foresee culture playing a role in your ongoing success in healthcare and the ability to adapt to that rapidly changing future in healthcare?
Absolutely. It is an industry as a whole that has been through a lot through the pandemic. Our workforces are strained at all healthcare organizations post-pandemic. And I think if we focus on the culture, it's going to help us with retaining good talent here. It's also going to help us recruit our future talent moving forward. Because if we're successful in driving a positive culture, people will feel it the moment that they're in the doors. And similarly, outsiders that are not, necessarily looking for employment, because we really rely upon our altruistic donor base. And if donors feel it as they're in the donor centers, they're likely to come back again. And similarly, if customers feel it as we're distributing products to save lives, they will view us as a strong partner that they want to work with on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, you mentioned donors here. Thank you for the answer. You mentioned donors here, and I'm glad you did, because at the end of this, you have donors and you have receivers of your product, and they are both so special, and you serve them both so well. And by the way, you can donate at Vitalant. They're all over the country. They have storefronts and locations everywhere. Now that I'm working with you, I see the signs everywhere. And by the way, the snacks are really good. So if you go there and donate blood, I mean, I may have taken a snack or two without donating when I've been visiting, just to be honest.
And I think the best part is when we notify you that your donation is being transported to a patient in need. And it's ultimately about that mission moment as to why people come in to donate.
Yeah. And just as fate would have it, right after I started working with Vitalant, one of my very best clients asked me if our meeting would end on time so she could go donate platelets. When I said to her, "Where will you be donating?" she said, "At Vitalant, of course." So the connections happen everywhere. Bhavi, I want to just congratulate you and thank you for being an unlikely culture champion. I've been in the organizational change game for decades. If you cut me in half and count my rings, I've got lots and lots of circles there. I'm 1 year older than dirt now. And in all of that time, I have never seen a chief legal officer take up the flag on culture before. And you are a change agent for the business. You're impacting thousands of people and setting a great example for others on the leadership team that no matter where you sit, you can see an opportunity, raise your hand and champion it. So on behalf of culture leaders everywhere, thank you for both making sure the organization is safe and that it's got a great culture going forward.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be in a position to be able to do it and supported by a leadership team that would allow it to come in through a chief legal officer. And so I fully support all chief legal officers across the country as they're doing M&A activity to consider being a culture champion as part of the process.
Yeah, it's just the best tie-in. Thank you. Listeners, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing the time with Bhavi Shah from Vitalant. Please like, listen, follow. Of course, get the podcast wherever podcasts can be found. And you can watch us live on YouTube. I shouldn't say live. We're not live, but you can watch us on YouTube as well. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next month with another exciting episode of the Magenta Mix podcast. Until then, take care. Bhavi, thank you so much.
Thank you.